Oregon's schedule works out incredibly favorably in 2024. And I don't think that was perfect English, but you get the point that I am making. I don't know that you could concoct a schedule that works out as well, given the teams that Oregon's playing. Having to play Ohio State and Michigan, who are going to be preseason top 10 teams, I think that praise for Michigan's like slightly too high. I think they're more in the 10 to 15 range than they are in the 5 to 10 range. But we'll see when the AP poll comes out. They were number 8 in the AP coaches poll. And the coaches poll and the AP poll usually don't differ all that much. So Michigan being on the road and Ohio State at home, that's a massive, massive split for Oregon. Because I have not made my official record prediction, nor will I for quite some time here on the show, but Oregon's schedule works out not just well with those games, but they have a Friday night game before Ohio State, so they get an extra day of rest, and they get eased into Big Ten conference play. If you look around the country at these realigned leagues and teams that are going into new conferences and the first look at their new schedule, there are some, like Utah, for instance, that you look at and say, they got some breaks. They got an opportunity to win some football games. And then there's Florida, which is not in a new conference. But you look at their schedule and go, ooh, yikes, oof. Or how about USC? You know who USC's first Big Ten game is against? Michigan. That's their first Big Ten game. Yeah, that's right. They start with LSU, then they play Utah State, and then they go at Michigan. Those are the first 3 games of the year for USC. You better come out guns blazing and firing on all cylinders. You compare that to Oregon's schedule. They've got a tune-up game, week 1 against Idaho. I will be there at Autzen Stadium. Very excited to be there because I haven't been to Autzen in about 7 years. I've seen Oregon in person several times, but not at Autzen, so I'm stoked about that. Then they play Boise State. Now that game is going to be a difficult-ish game. I think Oregon's going to win. I think they're finally going to buck the Boise State trend that they've had over the years. No pun intended that Boise State are the Broncos. But I think that game could be like Washington State this past year. You kind of start slow. You don't get into the feel. Then you settle down. You win by 20 points or so. And it's never really close at the end. You don't play Michigan until later in the year. You don't have to go to Wisconsin until later in the year. Now, that might not actually be a break. That might be the worst scheduling break Oregon has on this 2024 slate of games, because going to Wisconsin in November, a little bit tougher weather-wise than going to Wisconsin in September or even early October. So that's the one game I look at and go, if you wanted to make it easier, you'd put that game first and have UCLA be at the end of November. But still, it works out really well for the Ducks that their toughest road games are at Michigan, at Wisconsin, and the other ones are just kind of they're just kind of games. And they don't have Penn State on there, they don't have USC on there, and they have Washington at home. So I think the schedule works out really, really well. And that's part of the reason the national media really like the Ducks. So going back to that take from Heather, or the piece rather from Heather Dinich recently, she talked about the transition from Bo Nix to Dylan Gabriel, and that'll be pretty seamless. I think people agree on that. I don't think Gabriel's quite at Bo Nix's level, but he's the best quarterback in the Big Ten, and there's no one, unless Dylan Raiola is amazing as a true freshman, I don't think there's going to be anyone else that's as productive. Maybe Drew Aller at Penn State. He's also an experienced guy. I'd rather take Dylan Gabriel. I've seen Drew Aller in big games. I've seen Dylan Gabriel in big games. I'm taking Gabriel plus small guys for the win. But what she said the committee will like when evaluating Oregon's resume, and one of the reasons that she thinks Oregon has a 76%, according to ESPN's FPI, chance to make the college football playoff and a 12.8% chance to win the national title. They're plus 900 odds, which is one of the 5 highest in the entire country. Her piece says what the committee will like: Big Ten road wins against ranked opponents. November is when Oregon will truly feel like it's in the Big Ten, when it goes to Ann Arbor and Camp Randall Stadium at Wisconsin, with home games against Maryland and Washington. November is the month that should define the Ducks' place in the playoff. I agree that month is going to define a lot. The Ohio State game is what she has listed as the Ducks' toughest test. 100% agree. I don't think there's any argument there. The other aspect she wrote when evaluating teams in this piece is what the committee won't like. A September 7th home loss to Boise State. That could complicate things inside the committee meeting room if Boise State wins the Mountain West Conference and is the panel's highest ranked champion from the group of 5 conferences. It's a very plausible scenario, as ESPN Analytics projects Boise State to have the best chance to represent the group of 5 in the playoff. So does head-to-head matter? And you get into that sort of conversation. But I think Oregon's going to take care of business against Boise State. They're the favorites in the Mountain West. This is not just a good, solid Boise State team. This is not the Chris Peterson era Boise State teams, but they got some players. Their backfield is Malachi Nelson, former 5-star quarterback, and Ashton Genty, who had Power 4 offers all over the place, but decided to stay with Boise State, which I personally really, really respect. So I think that is why Oregon has such a great schedule, and those are just a couple elements. The relatively easy start, like 5-0, should be no problem. It shouldn't just be a 5-0 start. It should be a cruising 5-0 start. So I think that's where I feel with regards to Oregon's schedule and how they'll navigate. I think Dinich is pretty spot on there. A home loss to Boise State, that'd be pretty punitive. Even if they're the highest ranked G5 champion, that'd be pretty damning, I think, in the eyes of the committee. If Oregon is an at-large team, they'd probably get a much lower seed, because if Oregon is, as the media is hyping them up to be, and as, frankly, I have hyped them up to be, Boise State shouldn't be able to contend with Oregon. The highest ranked group of 5 conference champion should look like what Liberty did against Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl, 45-6. Now, I don't think that Liberty team was as good as SMU was when Preston Stone, their quarterback, was healthy. Like, they went on to lose in the Boston Bowl, the one that gets played at Fenway Park. They lost to a 6-6 Boston College team. They didn't have their quarterback. He's back healthy this year. They were 11-2 American Athletic Conference champs. That's the first or second best group of 5 league in the country. So I don't think Oregon played the best from the G5, but Liberty was decently good. But if Boise State comes to town and Oregon wins that game, and it looks like that, 45-6, then suddenly that, I don't think radically shifts the committee's view of Oregon. I think just legitimizes the hype in that moment. It's what you can accomplish in that game. You have more to lose than you have to gain, but that doesn't mean there's nothing to be gained for Oregon in that week 2 matchup. So if Oregon wins every game, and that of course gets them into the playoff, then all this hype will be lived up to. But this schedule, I cannot drive this point home enough. This schedule works out. You don't have a non-conference game that scares you. Oregon's about a 20-point favorite at Oregon State. They're going to be a big favorite at home against Boise State, and I don't think Boise can go into Autzen and win. And then you have Idaho. And then you start at UCLA in Big Ten play. So you have a non-conference slate where you should not play a one-possession game. And then you start in conference play with 2 games that also shouldn't be close. You have rebuilding Michigan State and rebuilding UCLA with first-year head coaches. Jonathan Smith is good. He's at home because Oregon plays them in Eugene. And you have Deshaun Foster, who I think is going to have a rough first year. Almost sneezed, was able to hold it in. I'm kind of proud of myself for that. I was ready to have the mute button, hit edit, didn't have to do it. Deshaun Foster, I think, is going to be in for a very, very rough year. You get the extra day of rest because that Michigan State game is on a Friday. I think Oregon's going to be in a really, really good spot going into that Ohio State game. And like Dinich said in her piece, it's going to be their toughest test. But they're going to be feeling about as good as they get. They should be feeling about as good as they can be going into that October 12th showdown. I cannot wait. Football is very close.